At the end of April, you'll start seeing memes of Justin Timberlake everywhere with the text, "It's gonna be May." If you're not familiar with this is a reference to the 2000 pop song, "It's Gonna Be Me," where Justin sings the hook. Only instead of saying "It's gonna be me," he actually sings, well, it sounds like he's saying it's gonna be May. Every year, this meme comes around, reminding us of both the hopeful month of May and how weird it was that pop stars used to sing like that. Justin is far from the only one to sing "me" as May. We've all probably heard a musician sing something like, "I'm missing you like Canday," or "I wanna bay, NRK." The nameless but frequent phenomenon inspired a great Atlas Obscura investigation by Dan Nosowitz. The article has some limitations though. For one, it doesn't explain the history of the May vowel. It also confuses May with a different vowel. The article claims that Stevie Wonder is one of these offenders, saying "bay-bay," but that's not what he actually says. First, listen to Stevie Wonder saying "baby," and then there's no A here. It's a short I, an I, not an A. The use of this short I is interesting by itself and deserves a thorough look in the future, but baby is not a baby. I first tackled this subject several years ago, tried to explain baby, baby, and baby. That's a lot, so in this video we're focusing on May and baby. We're tracing the history from bubblegum pop to punk rock and country music, and learning a little bit about linguistics along the way. To avoid having to say the vowel in May for the whole video, let's give these things some names. First, it's gonna be May. What's happening here is that the E vowel is being converted to an A vowel. This is an example of diphthongization, or a vowel breaking into two vowels. This breaking can apply to other words that have an E sound in them, so knees can become nays. We'll call this pattern me breaking. There are some dialects that have me breaking commonly, like Southern American English and London English. Here are some examples. First, no breaking. He loves me. And now with breaking. He loves me. Words like happy and sadly have an E sound in them, but the stress doesn't fall on the E. This puts them in a separate category from the me words, and we're going to call these happy words. Nowadays, most dialects of English have an E in these words. This is called tense happy. But in the 1800s, these happy words were pronounced with a short I sound, so they sounded like happy, very, anarchy. This pronunciation is called lax happy because the vowel is more relaxed. While lax happy isn't as widespread nowadays, speakers of more conservative varieties of received pronunciation, Southern American English, and African American English still use it. So what if you had vowel breaking in a happy word? This would result in happy. There's no agreed upon term for this, but we're going to call it happy breaking. Happy breaking isn't very common across dialects, but you can find it in London English and some types of Yorkshire English, for example. So let's compare again. First, tense happy. She is happy. Now, lax happy. She is happy. And finally, happy breaking. She is happy. We're also going to use breaking by itself to refer to both happy and me breaking. Now that we have the name, let's roll back the rock to an earlier time and trace a path for breaking to enter music. The coming timeline is not in any way meant to be exhaustive. It's a list of important moments meant to provide context and examples. Unfortunately, a comprehensive timeline of every song from the 20th century with breaking is beyond my means. It's a lot of music to sift through. So consider these instead just important signposts on our journey to tracing the history of vowel breaking in music. We'll start at the beginning of the modern era of pop music, the 50s. You won't find breaking in the crooners of this era with their lovingly standard pronunciation. You won't find breaking in the rock and rollers who are mostly black and keep their me's tense and their happies lax. Breaking is actually pretty rare in this era. The lone examples I've found are from country music. This is not a surprise because Southern American English has me breaking as a feature and country music is dominated by Southerners. You can hear an example from Lefty Frizzle saying "may" for me. It's not as exaggerated as Timberlake's, but it is definitely not a pure E, and it's not a lax I either.
They'll even pay the wedding bills to just get rid of me yelling. You want everything but me.
This subtler form of breaking is more common in the early years. You can also hear it in some Southern jazz singers like Chris Connor in "Swonderful."
You could care for me.
We can also find happy breaking in country music. In 1967, Waylon Jennings sings "She Called Me Baby," or really more, "She Called Me Baby."
She called me baby.
Moving into the 70s, we start finding examples of it sneaking into rock music. So far, the earliest example I've found is by the English rock group The Rolling Stones. They didn't use much breaking in their 60s era material, but their 1974 song "It's Only Rock and Roll, But I Like It" has a subtle example of me breaking. Mick Jagger doesn't have me breaking in his speech, so he must have heard it elsewhere. He may have gotten it from listening to country music. He revealed much later on in his career that he liked the music of Waylon Jennings. In 1975, an American English rock group called The Arrows recorded a response to the Rolling Stones song, and they called it "I Love Rock and Roll." Their American lead singer also gave me breaking a try.
I saw her dancing there by the record machine. Could tell it wouldn't be long till she was with me, yeah, me. And I could tell it wouldn't be long till she was with me, yeah, me. Sing it.
Then, in 1976, the English punk group The Sex Pistols released their first single, "Anarchy," in the UK. Besides being massively successful, it also had me breaking and happy breaking in notable quantities. The singer Johnny Rotten came from a working-class household in London, so this me breaking was not copped from country music. Instead, it came from working-class London speech. You can hear an example in this interview where he pronounces "week" to sound more like "wake."
Watch Top of the Pops and send those boring little letters into Melody Maker week after week.
From here, both me breaking and happy breaking appear sporadically throughout the 80s. The 1982 cover of "I Love Rock and Roll" by Joan Jett is the first #1 US hit of the 80s to feature me breaking, imitating the same vowels that the Arrows used.
Till it would be long that he was with me, yeah, me.
1986 then had the top 10 hit by the Beastie Boys, "You Gotta Fight for Your Right to Party." Although the Beastie Boys were basically a rap group by that time, they started out as a hardcore punk band. Perhaps there's some influence in their vowels because we can also hear some happy breaking.
You gotta fight for your right to party.
Breaking also made its way into glam rock. The 1987 song "Pour Some Sugar on Me" by the English group Def Leppard should perhaps be called "Pour Some Sugar on May." By the 90s, me breaking and happy breaking had firmly entrenched themselves in rock and rock-adjacent genres. You'll find examples of breaking and rock music throughout the 90s. My favorite 90s era example of breaking in rock music is the theme song to the video game Sonic Adventure, which is just a beautiful example of all the cliches associated with rock music by the end of the decade. However, knowing the path it took for me breaking and happy breaking to get into rock music doesn't explain how it got into pop music. This path is a little murkier and more mysterious, but we'll find our way through the darkness. In 1994, the rapper The Notorious B.I.G. released Juicy. The Brooklyn girl group Total sings on the hook. The chorus was interpolated from Mtume's song Juicy Fruit in 1983, but the original version did not have happy breaking, meaning Total added it on their own.
I've had a few, but not that many. But you're the only love that gives me good and plenty.
Happy breaking and me breaking both appear in Mariah Carey's #1 hit song, Always Be My Baby. This is one of the earlier places in pure pop music where we see happy breaking and exaggerated me breaking.
Boy, don't you know you can't escape me? Ooh, darling, 'cause you'll always be my baby, and we'll linger on.
It's not clear how Mariah came across this form. Perhaps she picked it up from Juicy. Mariah was a noted fan of hip-hop. She was also a fan of glam rock. She's covered songs by Def Leppard in the past. Happy breaking then makes a reoccurrence in the song Quit Playing Games With My Heart by the Backstreet Boys. This song was one of the earliest successful songs in America to be produced by the Swedish producer Max Martin, a fact that we'll revisit later. Then we have Wannabe, released in 1996 in the UK and 97 in the US, which has subtle me breaking by Mel B. Mel is from West Yorkshire, which is a dialect region that also has me breaking in speech. In 1999, both happy and me breaking reached levels of extremeness heretofore only dreamed of by man, with Mandy Moore stretching them all the way. This is one of the most obvious and exaggerated uses of breaking. It shows that by this point, happy breaking and me breaking had become associated with contemporary pop music, especially of the teeny bopper variety.
I'm so addicted to the loving that you're feeding to me. This feeling's got me weak in the knees. Show me who you are, like sugar to my heart, baby. I'm craving for you. I'm craving, I'm missing you,
It all comes full circle in the year 2000, when NSYNC released It's Gonna Be Me, a song that topped the US charts for 2 weeks. The song has both a tense me and me breaking, which makes them easy to compare.
Remember you told me it's gonna be me. But in the end, you know it's gonna be me. It's gonna be me. It's gonna be me. It's gonna be me.
Justin was asked about this pronunciation in an interview and said something rather interesting.
Yeah, I just want to throw Max Martin on the chopping block for that one.
Okay.
Even this
Did he give you a reason to that? Like, or was it just singing like that?
I think he just wanted me to sound like I was from Tennessee.
Max Martin gave him direction on how to sing. Max Martin, if you'll remember, also produced Quit Playing Games With My Heart, which had happy breaking. Could he have guided the Backstreet Boys in using this pronunciation? Timberlake clearly associates it with Southerners as opposed to English punk rockers, but Max Martin was a fan of hard rock, having been in a rock group himself.
His knowledge of music is so vast. He's such a closet punker.
It is likely that Max Martin picked up on breaking from listening to other rockers. He also could have picked it up from Mariah Carey and the Spice Girls. He listened to pop music and he could tell a trend when he heard one. Noticeably, A number of Max Martin produced songs feature vowel breaking. This may seem coincidental, but Max Martin has been known to record demos of songs before giving them to singers and telling them to copy the performance as much as they can. Another popular singer he worked with was, of course, Britney Spears. She used this vowel a lot in her first albums, which had a lot of Max Martin influence, as well as in her mid-career. She even did a cover of I Love Rock and Roll, bringing this whole thing into the 21st century.
There's nothing you can do or say. I'm not your property as from today. I love rock and roll, so come and take the time and dance with me.
Martin is known to be controlling about the music he writes.
There's a certain way to sing certain songs that is going to be even catchier and even hookier.
First thing I learned about Max as a singer was this thing, this freaking hand, this hand. Like there was a certain rhythm that you had that Max heard, and it was, if you were singing it like off or you were singing in your own rhythm in your own way, it was always on top. Yeah, Max would say, no, do it again, right here, right here.
Seabrook writes, and yet Martin is known to insist that the artists he works with sing his songs exactly the way he sings them on the demos. In a sense, Spears, Perry, and Swift are all singing covers of Max Martin recordings. They are also among the few people in the world who have actually heard the recordings. Countless self-proclaimed performers on YouTube sing Max Martin songs, but there is not a single publicly available video or audio recording of Martin performing his own stuff. In the course of researching my book, The Song Machine, I got to hear an actual Max Martin demo for Baby One More Time, when a record man who had it on his phone played it for me. The Swede sounded exactly like Spears. If true, this would go a long way to explaining why other artists who have worked with Martin use breaking. For example, Martin worked on Katy Perry's song Part of Me. She actually goes as far as to rhyme me with way in the song.
I just wanna throw my phone away. Find out who is really there for me.
2010 era pop songs don't have to be produced by Max Martin, but his imprint is still strong. Taylor Swift's song Out of the Woods was produced by Jack Antonoff, but she still uses me breaking on the high notes. We've traced the path that happy breaking and me breaking have taken through pop history. Happy breaking and me breaking are no longer hot and trendy. They are not as omnipresent on the pop charts nowadays as they used to be in their heyday of the 2000s. But neither have they faded away entirely. Instead, they've found a home in the linguistic toolbox of singers. They've expanded from the rock singer register to the pop singer register. Perhaps this is why we don't even comment on contemporary singers who still use it. It's become invisible to us as a sign of popness. The question to ask is why singers found this feature so appealing. There are plenty of other vowels they could have used after all, so why these? Nozowitz's Atlas Obscura article brings up an important point. Close vowels, like E, are harder for singers to sing than more open vowels like I. If you look back at a lot of the examples, you'll notice that breaking is more common on sustained or high notes. Changing vowels to make singing easier or more beautiful isn't unusual at all in sung speech. Classical singers have to learn how to modify their vowels to get the large, resonant, and particular sound they need. These vowel placements are not the same as you would find in spoken speech. Pop singers are not usually classically trained, but you don't need classical training to experience the biomechanical feedback when you sing E on a high note versus A, and the A is easier. What if you use these sounds on a lower note, which doesn't need the help of a different vowel? Vocal coach Liz Lewis was quoted in the Atlas Obscura article as saying that this is an attempt to co-opt the signifiers of intensity without actually needing to use them. This would match J.C. Chase's recollection of how It's Gonna Be Me was recorded. Quote, "It was actually a very conscious choice to say it's gonna be me that way because we wanted it to really punch. For certain words, we bent the pronunciation. We were hitting the L's hard on lose. Instead of saying, you don't want to lose, which would be kind of boring, we'd be like, you don't want to lose. But when you're listening to someone in the studio singing it that way, at first you're like, what is wrong with you? But you have to dig and hit these different shapes of consonants and vowels to give them energy. Instead of saying, it's gonna be me, we said, it's gonna be me, for it to hit harder. There is another process we need to consider before coming to the conclusion that it's all fake energy. The process of enregistrement. A register is a particular, socially identifiable variety of language. So the classic examples are that there are formal and informal registers. But you can also broaden the concept to refer to things like how English speakers can put on a vampire voice by saying, I want to suck your blood. Internet linguist Gretchen McCulloch points out that this is because one of the most iconic film Draculas was played by Bela Lugosi, a Hungarian man with a Hungarian accent. But when Adam Sandler's vampire character in Hotel Transylvania says,
Welcome to Hotel Transylvania,
he's not trying to communicate that his character is Hungarian, he's trying to communicate that he's a vampire. We call this association of linguistic features with an identity enregistrement. This concept can also apply to music. Originally, the people who said may and happy were just using their own Southern or London accents, but when other singers started copying their pronunciation, they removed it from its origins. In turn, these features were reanalyzed and enregistered as part of a rock register or a pop register. Registers aren't mandatory. You can have vampires without Eastern European accents, but registers do communicate something, your awareness of belonging to that group. A rock or pop singer who uses may is able to signal their awareness of rock and pop singing styles, not to mention make use of a useful vowel modification in difficult songs. That doesn't make may a sign of fakeness or inauthenticity. Registers aren't always explicitly taught or required. You can learn different registers basically by osmosis. Just being in a different linguistic environment makes people change their own speech to sound more like the people they're trying to communicate to. This is called accommodation, and it's a sign of good faith, social awareness, and wanting to make things easier for other people. We can also consider that the rock and pop registers, by choosing to use them, show that you're aware of the history of the music that you're engaging in. Yeah, I've listened to the classics, I've listened to other stuff, I'm not just coming up with stuff randomly. I know what scene I'm placing myself in. So it is quite a bit more complicated than saying that this is fake or inauthentic. Ultimately, there are many reasons why a singer may use breaking. They may be using an articulatory technique that helps them reach and sustain higher notes. They may be participating in a declaration of socio-musical identity. They may be doing it for aesthetic reasons to make the song sound better or hit harder. They may be doing it because it's just how all the musicians they listen to sound like and they just picked up on it. Linguistic innovations happen all the time, but not all of them catch on. With happy breaking and me breaking in music, we are lucky to have such a long corpus of recorded music to use to trace its origins. The spread of breaking is a fascinating example of how different genres of music interact with and define each other. It's also an example of how modality-specific features can make a difference. I am sure that the fact that breaking is easier to sing helped it catch on. Despite the massive spread of breaking in music, it remains locked to sung speech. Nobody has started saying, I hope you love May, or I hope you're happy in speech unless they're joking or they speak one of the varieties of English that already has those features. This also illustrates another feature, how we are able to clearly distinguish between registers. A singer can say it's gonna be May multiple times in a song and then get on an interview and use me
Just wanted me
consistently the entire time. Sung speech and spoken speech registers aren't anywhere near as porous as the different genre registers are. In Atlas Obscura, Nosowitz writes that it is surprising that nobody has taken the linguistics of pop music seriously considering how obvious the differences are, even for lay people. This is true. There is a treasure trove of interesting information for both linguists and musicologists in sung speech if we only care to listen. After all, the simple meme that started this whole thing was almost 60 years in the making.
It's gonna be May.